Welcome to American Variety Radio. I'm your host, Court Lewis. Biologically, we humans are in the same family of great apes as the gorillas and chimpanzees. There are more similarities than differences among the members of that family called hominids. In fact, we share a very high percentage of our DNA with chimps. But there's a species of hominid called bonobos who live in Africa, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, with which we share 98.7% of our DNA. Living where they live, they are very endangered. They look like smaller chimps and are in fact very much like humans socially, except they rarely fight. My guest today is Vanessa Woods, a research scientist at Duke University, who studies these animals and is dedicated to understanding them and also to protecting them from extinction. She wrote a book called Bonobo Handshake, published 2010, and the subtitle is A Memoir of Love and Adventure in the Congo. I think probably a lot of people have never heard of bonobos.
Bonobos are really incredible, and they're the only great apes that don't kill each other. We are most closely related to chimpanzees and bonobos, but while humans and chimpanzees, they have war, they have murder, females are beaten and their infants are occasionally killed,
bonobos don't do any of that.
And scientifically, that's really interesting. How is it that we share 98.7% of our DNA, and yet this kind of darker side seems to be completely missing in bonobos?
I'd say monkeys in general are known for being pretty highly sexed, but are bonobos really noticeably different from other monkeys in that regard?
Yes.
This is a constant
thing?
They
are definitely one of the most promiscuous species. Let's just get this out of the way. They have a lot of sex. You know, I wrote Bonobo Handshake because in bonobos, sex is like a handshake. They do it across genders, they do it across age. Any way you can think of, bonobos have already done it. Scientifically, why this is interesting is the way sex is used. It is really a conflict resolution, and it seems to be the mechanism by which bonobos can sort of switch off any escalating violence. And I think in France, everybody knows what a bonobo is and nobody knows what a chimpanzee is. I guess they look so human. So when two females are GG rubbering, that's when they, rub their clitorises together until, they look like they're orgasming to me. It looks so human. They have sex in the missionary position, they have a whole suite of Kama Sutra positions, and it's definitely different to monkeys. I've watched capuchin monkeys in the Costa Rican wilderness, and they also have a lot of sex, but they just don't have the same amount of sex as bonobos. Bonobos are in a class of their own.
It sounds like it's pretty clear to you that their nonviolence is directly tied to the huge amount of sex they have, that it basically gets rid of their aggressions, and they've structured their society around having fun together rather than fighting together. Huh?
Definitely seems to be a mechanism to de-escalate the conflict. That's what me and a lot of other researchers have seen. We work mainly in the sanctuaries, and there the sexual behavior is augmented even more because bonobos in the wild, they usually have sex around food. And in the sanctuary, they're fed 3 times a day. So this is 3 regular times a day that you can see all sorts of amazing behaviors happen. For all our technology and all our so-called intelligence, we haven't found a way to not kill each other.
From what I've read, they're matriarchal societies, and I'm wondering if that has something to do with their nonviolence.
It's always better when females are in charge, and the females are definitely in charge. The highest ranking bonobo is always a female. They just keep things nicely under control. Like if a male starts to get all puffed up and acting like a chimpanzee, the female will do something in Congo they call correcting the male. For instance, there's this bonobo called Mimi, and I once saw a tango who was an up-and-coming male just walk up to her and just backhand her across the face hard. I mean, it was so hard she almost got whiplash. This is something that we see in chimpanzees all the time. The first thing a male does when they hit adolescence is start beating up all the females in the group, starting with their mothers. So when this happened, Mimi just turned and looked at him, and she had this killer cold stare. And
within 5 seconds, 5 of her best female girlfriends had come, and they had beaten up Tatanga and were chasing him around the forest.
It is not that bonobos don't have any violence, they do, but violence is used to keep the peace, whereas chimpanzees and humans, it seems to be to dominate and control.
And what are their current circumstances? How many of them are there, and how are they endangered and threatened?
What you said think about where they live, that's really crucial to everything. They only live in one country, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which has seen the most brutal and bloody war of any of the wars since World War II. I think the death toll is 5.2 million and counting. But instability is also an asset because the Democratic Republic of Congo has been so difficult. Actually, a large part of their forest is intact. So the Congo Basin is the second largest forest in the world after the Amazon, and it is incredible when you fly over it. It's hard to imagine this vast, untouched forest. This is where bonobos live. It is very difficult to penetrate. So the short answer is we don't know how many bonobos there are. You couldn't fill a football stadium with the bonobos that are left.
So even though the war activity doesn't intrude much into it, there still must be lots of villagers here and there throughout that whole area.
Hunting bonobos is illegal. They still do hunt them because the standard of living of these people is very low. The Congo Basin is like 3 times the size of France, so the population density is quite low. Bonobos have a good shot, except for what the rest of the world is creating, which is a thriving international market in live apes. And I think it was in 2013, the UN released a report about what used to happen with great apes was that these poor villagers were going in and hunting apes for meat, and then incidentally there'd be this small orphan bonobo attached to their dead mother, and then they'd try and sell that bonobo. But what's happening now,
driven by markets
in the Middle East and China and even parts of Europe, are that these infant apes, gorillas, bonobos, chimpanzees, orangutans, they are going for vast sums of money. So what used to be an opportunistic trade is now this kind of centralized crime ring driven by markets, and that's seeing a rapid decline of all the great apes.
So what's the focus of your research at Duke?
Our research group has looked at the way they make economic decisions, the way they relate to strangers, the way they help each other, and the graduate students from our research group has done an incredible project on the fact that bonobos actually prefer to help strangers than their group mates. We usually think of altruism as something that's unique to humans, doing something for someone else at a cost to yourself. All great apes are incredibly social. If there's ever an outside threat, they definitely band together. I don't think this is something that's unique to bonobos.
Apart from the violence discussed earlier, how different are they from chimpanzees?
That is the thing. In a lot of ways, they are extremely similar. They look similar. It's difficult to tell a chimpanzee from a bonobo unless you know what you're looking for. It really is the psychology.
Well, I'm wondering if their nonviolent tendency is counterproductive. How do they deal with more aggressive animals like chimpanzees when they run into them? Do they run? Do they fight? Are they capable of defending themselves?
Well, that's the convenient thing about the Congo River. Bonobos and chimpanzees do not share the same habitat. They don't share habitat with anyone they would have to compete with, including gorillas. And Richard Wrangham at Harvard, one of his theories is that because chimpanzees share their habitat with gorillas, there's a lot more competition, and chimpanzees go for the high-reaching fruits, and sometimes they hunt for meat, and there's just more of a chance of food deprivation, which has led to the more competitive lifestyle. Whereas bonobos who live north of the Congo River, they are not competing for this salad. Bonobos can live on salad if they need to. They'll also eat fruit and opportunistically hunt, although this is seen very rarely. But if they get hungry, they can have a salad. Chimpanzees, if they get hungry, they're in trouble. This might account for some of the differences we see between them.
Throughout this whole discussion, I'm really thinking the parallels with human society and about their isolation and how it protects their ability to be passive. I wonder whether it kind of implies that a utopian, peaceful society can only really be sustainable when it's not under threat.
Humans are so two-faced. In some ways, we're more peaceful than bonobos. We can be so altruistic. But then on the about face, we're capable of war and genocide and doing horrible things to each other. And I think that this has something to do with people that we see as being like us. If we see someone as being like us, we can be incredibly kind and compassionate towards them. But if we see someone as being not like us, that's when we're capable of incredible cruelty. So I'm not really sure whether it's to do with geographic isolation, but more about how we identify with each other. And that's why bonobos are important, because they may provide the answer. You can look at the mechanisms and the way in which they avoid conflict and peacefully coexist.
You talked about the female dominance in the matriarchal society and how that's maintained, but how do they do that, if not through some kind of intimidation?
There is violence in bonobo society. I think some of it's matrilineal, but then bonobo adolescents leave. So I think, females get to the top the same way that other great apes get to the top, but it's just not the severe violence. What's really important to bonobo females is that they have coalitions. The alpha female bonobo has a cohort of girlfriends that she depends on, and I think this is what allows bonobos to kind of reverse that order of male dominance. The few female-dominated species that there are, the females are bigger than the male, like black widow spiders, where the female occasionally eats her mate, or hyenas, where the females are just as big as the males, and by the way, they have penises. So in bonobos, like, the females can be 60% of the size of the males, but they're still dominant. This is a lot to do with female alliances and sort of the cohort of friends that the alpha female has.
I know you're a mother of 2 young children, and I'm sure your research gives you insights into parenting.
So we just basically brought up the kids like baby bonobos. Like, we slept with them, they did what they wanted when they wanted. And I don't know if it's the best example because bonobo societies are very baby-dominated. Claudine Andre actually has a movie called Bonobos that is all about her and her work that is coming out, I think, later on this year in the U.S., But the other movie is a crazy English movie about some people living in a house in England. I haven't seen it yet, but hopefully there'll be lots of movies about bonobos coming out. But those are the 2 I know of right now.
There's something I've really never understood completely, the distinction between primates, monkeys, and apes.
There's about as much similarity between a great ape and a monkey as there is between a cat and a dog. Apes eat monkeys. In the great tree of life, there's lots of connections between them, but great apes are very closely related to human. We are the 5th great apes, and their monkeys are somewhere not too distant related, but pretty far away. They're all primates.
And there's some other primates that are a little odd.
Primates are the big family, and the great apes are all cousins. Monkeys are that 4th removed great aunt that you never see.
There are so many endangered species all over the world.
I love mountain gorillas, I love polar bears, I love all these endangered species that are kind of slipping from our grasp. But the real value in bonobos is what they can teach us about ourselves. Chimpanzees are wonderful. They have these amazing social connections, they have empathy, they have love, but they also have this darker side just like we do. And bonobos, they are so closely related to us, and yet they don't have this. For all this intelligence we have not managed to do what bonobos have done. And if we lose bonobos, then we've really lost the only chance we have of understanding ourselves.
Has this research and the exposure to bonobos changed you personally?
Yes, absolutely. I used to be so despondent, I guess, about the fate of the human race. What bonobos have done is they've given me hope, because I know that there's a way that we can overcome this darker side to our nature. There is a way that we can live where we feel that other people are other humans and not objects, not demonize them or think that they deserve what it is that's coming to them.
To learn more, vanessawoods.net. And if you'd like to help preserve bonobos, you can go to
LOLAYA bonobo.org.
American Variety Radio.